My mother-in-law's face turned ghostly white as I played the video on the big screen TV during our family Thanksgiving dinner. The footage showed her sneaking into our bedroom at 6 a.m. while we were away, carefully placing tiny cameras behind our mirror, inside our air vents, and even in our bathroom. "Is there something you'd like to explain to everyone, Barbara?" I asked calmly, as 20 family members sat in stunned silence. The look of utter humiliation on her face was worth every second of the 3 months I spent planning this moment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Emma, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a fairly normal relationship with my mother-in-law. Not perfect, but manageable. My husband Michael and I have been married for 3 years, and Barbara had always been somewhat overbearing, but nothing I couldn't handle. She'd make little comments about my cooking, my career choices, or how I kept our house, but I brushed them off as typical mother-in-law behavior. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came when Barbara mentioned specific details about a private conversation Michael and I had in our bedroom. We had been discussing possibly postponing having children for another year, while I pursued a promotion at work. The next day, Barbara called me and said, "I hope you realize how important family is to Michael. His career has always supported your ambitions, and now you're putting yours first." I was stunned. We hadn't told anyone about that conversation. When I asked how she knew, she fumbled with her words before saying, "Oh, Michael mentioned it." But when I asked Michael about it later that night, he swore he hadn't said a word to his mother. "You know, I wouldn't discuss that with her, especially when we haven't even decided ourselves," he insisted. I believed him, but it left me with an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. How could she have known such specific details? That wasn't the only incident. A week later, Barbara made a comment about a small argument Michael and I had about finances. Again, something we'd only discussed in the privacy of our bedroom. Then she mentioned the birthday gift I was planning to buy Michael, which I had only researched on my laptop while sitting in bed. Each time the details were too specific to be coincidental. Maybe she's guessing really well? My friend Jenna suggested when I confided in her, but I knew it was more than that. The comments were becoming more frequent and increasingly specific. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to figure it out. You won't believe what happened next. I decided to do a thorough sweep of our house while Michael was at work, and Barbara was at her weekly bridge game. I started with obvious places, checking for recording devices near vents, light fixtures, and behind picture frames. Nothing. But then I remembered something from a crime show I'd watched. Cameras disguised as everyday objects. With that in mind, I began examining everything more closely. The smoke detector in our bedroom looked slightly different than the others in the house. I grabbed a chair, carefully removed it, and felt my heart drop into my stomach. There it was, a tiny camera, perfectly concealed within the device. My hands were shaking as I examined it. This wasn't some cheap spy gear. This was high-quality surveillance equipment. The discovery sent me into a frenzy. I checked every room, finding 5 more cameras strategically placed throughout our home. One in the living room bookshelf inside a decorative clock, another disguised as a USB wall charger in the kitchen, one in the bathroom air vent, one behind the TV in our bedroom, and the most disturbing one, a tiny pinhole camera inside the headboard of our bed. The invasion of privacy was so complete, so calculated, that I felt physically ill. But who would do this? Deep down, I already knew. Only one person had both the motive and the opportunity: Barbara. She had a key to our house for emergencies, and often came by when we weren't home to drop off food or water the plants. Michael always thought it was sweet. I had thought it was annoying but harmless. Now I realized it was something far more sinister. I sat on the edge of our bed, cameras in a pile next to me, trying to process this violation. My first instinct was to call Michael immediately, to scream and cry, and demand we confront his mother right away. But then a calmer, more calculated part of my brain took over. If I confronted Barbara now, she would deny everything. She'd make me look paranoid, possibly even turn Michael against me. No, I needed indisputable proof that she was behind this, and then I needed to make sure she could never do something like this again. This is where things get interesting. Instead of removing all the cameras, I decided to leave them exactly where they were. But I wasn't going to let Barbara continue spying on us. I went to an electronics store and bought signal jammers that would block the camera's transmissions without alerting her that they'd been discovered. Then, I purchased my own set of cameras, larger, more obvious ones, and installed them in plain sight around the house. "What are these for?" Michael asked when he got home that evening. "Just a precaution," I told him. "There have been some break-ins in the neighborhood." It wasn't entirely a lie. There had been a burglary a few blocks away several months ago. Michael, always concerned about safety, didn't question it further. What he didn't know was that I had also installed hidden cameras of my own, pointing at Barbara's hidden cameras. I wanted to catch her in the act of checking on her equipment or placing new devices. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait. For the next 2 weeks, I pretended everything was normal. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, and acted as if I hadn't discovered that my privacy had been completely violated. But during this time, I was gathering evidence. I reviewed my hidden camera footage daily, and sure enough, Barbara came by at least twice a week when we were out. She would check her cameras, sometimes adjust them, and occasionally replace batteries. I documented everything meticulously, but here's where my plan evolved into something more than just gathering evidence. I realized I had an unprecedented opportunity. Barbara thought she was still successfully spying on us. What if I used that to my advantage? What if I fed her false information that would ultimately expose her? The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. She had made a fool of me for months. Now it was my turn. I began staging conversations with Michael. Nothing too obvious at first, just mentions of plans or decisions that weren't quite accurate. "I'm thinking of painting the guest bedroom next weekend," I'd say, knowing full well I had no such intentions. Sure enough, Barbara would call a day later offering to help with the painting or suggesting color schemes. Michael was confused by his mother's sudden interest in our home decor, but I played innocent. "Maybe she's just trying to be helpful," I suggested, while secretly documenting each instance of her revealing knowledge she couldn't possibly have unless she was watching us. As the weeks went on, I became bolder with the misinformation I fed to Barbara's cameras. I left fake financial documents on the counter showing a substantial inheritance I'd supposedly received. I had loud phone conversations about job offers in other states. Each piece of false information was carefully crafted to provoke a specific reaction from Barbara, and she took the bait every time. She'd call or visit, dropping hints or asking questions that revealed she knew things she shouldn't. But my ultimate plan was much bigger than this. Thanksgiving was approaching, and Barbara was hosting the entire family, about 20 people, including Michael's siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins. It would be the perfect stage for the final act of my plan. The week before Thanksgiving, I made sure Barbara's cameras captured a very specific conversation. Michael and I sat in the living room, and I told him I was concerned about his mother's mental health. "I've noticed some really strange behavior," I said, loud enough for the hidden microphones to pick up. Sometimes she seems confused about what we've told her versus what she's just thinking about. And she's been making these comments that make me wonder if she's having memory issues or even hallucinations. Michael, genuinely concerned, asked for examples. I gave vague answers, suggesting we should observe her more closely at Thanksgiving before deciding if we needed to speak to her doctor. I knew this would infuriate Barbara, who prided herself on being sharp and independent at 65. I also knew she wouldn't be able to confront me about it without revealing her source of information. The day before Thanksgiving, I executed the final phase of my plan. While Barbara was busy preparing for the big dinner, I visited her house with the pretense of dropping off some desserts. While there, I asked to use her computer to look up a recipe. She happily obliged, probably thinking it gave her a chance to check her surveillance feeds while I was distracted. What she didn't know was that I had come prepared. As soon as I was alone with her computer, I quickly found what I was looking for: the program she used to view the camera feeds from our house. Just as I suspected, she had everything saved right on her desktop in a folder labeled House Monitor. Within minutes, I had copied all the video files showing her installing and checking the cameras, along with clips of her watching the feeds. The evidence was irrefutable. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I was surprisingly calm as we drove to Barbara's house. Michael noticed my mood and squeezed my hand. "Everything okay? You seem different today." I smiled at him. "Everything is about to be perfect," I assured him. I had a small USB drive in my purse containing everything I needed for what was about to happen. When we arrived, Barbara greeted us warmly, though I noticed her eyes lingering on me with slight suspicion. She had undoubtedly heard my concerns about her mental state and was wondering what I might say to the family. If only she knew what was really coming. The afternoon progressed normally. Family arrived, drinks were served, and the usual holiday chatter filled the house. I waited patiently, playing the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law, helping in the kitchen and making small talk. Just before dinner was served, when everyone was gathered in the living room, I made my move. "Barbara, I brought something I thought everyone might want to see," I said cheerfully, pulling out my USB drive. "It's a sort of family retrospective." Always eager to be the center of attention, Barbara readily agreed. "Oh, how thoughtful. Let's put it on the TV." I connected the drive to her smart TV and pulled up the first video file. "This is actually footage from our house," I explained as I pressed play. The room fell silent as the screen showed Barbara entering our bedroom with a small stepladder and a bag full of surveillance equipment. The footage was crystal clear. There was no mistaking what was happening as Barbara carefully installed a camera in our smoke detector, then moved on to place another behind our bedroom mirror. The timestamp in the corner showed it was from 3 months ago. I glanced at Barbara, whose face had drained of all color. She lunged for the remote, but I held it firmly out of reach. "Wait, there's more," I said loudly, making sure everyone was paying attention. I played clip after clip, Barbara checking her cameras, Barbara installing new ones, and finally, Barbara sitting at her computer, gleefully watching footage of Michael and me in our most private moments. The room erupted into chaos. Michael stared at his mother in horrified disbelief. "Mom? What is this?" His voice was barely a whisper. Barbara's denial was immediate and desperate. "That's not, I didn't, it's been edited," she sputtered, looking frantically around the room for support. But the evidence was undeniable, playing out in high definition for everyone to see. I waited for the initial shock to subside before I spoke. For months, Barbara has been spying on us. She's placed cameras throughout our home, in our bedroom, our bathroom, everywhere. She's been watching our most intimate moments, and using what she learns to manipulate us. Michael's brother stood up, disgust evident on his face. That sick mom. Seriously sick. His wife pulled their children closer to her, as if to protect them from the revelation. Michael's father, divorced from Barbara for 10 years, shook his head. I always knew you had boundary issues, Barb, but this is criminal. Barbara turned to Michael, tears streaming down her face. Sweetie, you have to understand. I was just worried about you. She's been changing you, pulling you away from the family. I needed to know what was happening, but Michael wasn't having it. He stood up, his hands shaking. You put cameras in our bedroom, in our bathroom. You've been watching us like we're some kind of show for your entertainment? His voice broke. How could you do this to us? To me? I placed a hand on Michael's arm, both to support him and to prevent him from saying something he might regret. Then I addressed the room. I discovered these cameras 2 months ago. Instead of confronting Barbara immediately, I decided to gather evidence and understand the full extent of her invasion. What you're seeing is just a small sample of what I found. Barbara tried one last desperate tactic. She's setting me up. She put those cameras there herself to make me look bad. She's always hated me. That's when I played my final card. I pulled up a video of Barbara sitting at her computer, speaking to herself as she watched a feed from our living room. Look at her, acting like she owns the place. She has no idea I can see everything. I'll always know what they're up to. She'll never take my son away from me. The timestamp showed it was from just 2 weeks ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara slumped into a chair, finally realizing there was no escaping what she had done. The family dinner was effectively over. People began gathering their coats and making excuses to leave, throwing disgusted glances at Barbara as they exited. Michael was in shock, barely able to process what had happened. I took his hand and led him outside to get some air. On the front porch, he finally broke down. I can't believe she would do this. All those times she just happened to know things. I thought you were telling her stuff, or that I was mentioning things without remembering. He looked at me, his eyes full of remorse. I should have trusted you more. I held him close. You couldn't have known. She's your mother. You're supposed to be able to trust her. We didn't stay for dinner. No one did. As we were leaving, Barbara grabbed my arm, her eyes wild with a mixture of anger and desperation. You planned this, she hissed. You humiliated me in front of the entire family. I looked her directly in the eyes. No, Barbara, you did this to yourself. I just made sure everyone could see who you really are. I gently removed her hand from my arm. By the way, we'll be changing our locks tomorrow. Please don't contact us for a while. We'll let you know when, if, we're ready to talk. The drive home was quiet. Michael was still processing everything, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. When we got home, the first thing we did was remove every single one of Barbara's cameras and my counter-surveillance equipment. We swept the entire house twice more to be absolutely certain we'd found everything. That night, as we lay in bed in our now truly private bedroom, Michael turned to me. Thank you, he said simply, for not just confronting her right away, for getting actual proof. No one would have believed it otherwise. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I needed to make sure she couldn't deny it or turn it around on me. And honestly, I needed everyone to see it so she couldn't do it again. To us, or anyone else. In the weeks that followed, the family was divided. Some thought my public exposure was too harsh, despite acknowledging that Barbara's actions were inexcusable. Others felt she got exactly what she deserved. Michael's sister Jane, who had always been closer to Barbara than anyone, eventually admitted that her mother had monitored her house years ago when she first got married. As for Barbara, she sent tearful apologies, tried to justify her actions, then switched to angry accusations before finally going silent when she realized none of it was working. Michael decided to keep his distance, agreeing to speak with her only after she began therapy for her controlling behavior. For me, there was a certain peace in knowing that I had taken back control. Our home was ours again. Our private conversations stayed private. And most importantly, Barbara's true nature had been exposed, not just to us, but to everyone who mattered to her. 6 months have passed since that Thanksgiving. Barbara is supposedly in therapy now, though I have my doubts about her commitment to change. Michael and I have established firm boundaries, and we're stronger than ever. We've even started talking about having children again, on our own timeline. Sometimes I still find myself checking for cameras, a paranoid habit I'm not sure will ever fully disappear. But mostly I feel a profound sense of vindication. Barbara thought she could control us through surveillance and manipulation. Instead, she lost her son's trust and her family's respect. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's that privacy is sacred. Once violated, it's nearly impossible to restore that sense of security. But there's also power in turning someone's weapons against them. Barbara thought she was watching me, but in the end, I was the one who saw her, truly saw her, for exactly who she is. And that, my friends, is how I got the perfect revenge on my spying mother-in-law. Was I too harsh? Would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm still trying to process everything that happened. But one thing I know for sure, no one will ever violate my privacy again without consequences.